the 5 or 6 knockouts. I think it was 7 finishes total on the card. I know you didn't see the fights, but I just wanted to get your opinion, at least on the Korean Zombie. And I know you've obviously read about it, knocking out Dennis Bermudez in less than 3 minutes and taking a shot himself. The biggest question mark for me going in was, how hard did he get hit in training, right? Like, did that Bermudez crack last night? Was that the hardest he's been hit since the Jose Aldo fight in 2013? And obviously, I think he answered a lot of questions. But when you come back from a layoff of 3.5 years and beat the number 9 guy in the world like that, I mean, I thought this guy had a high ceiling. I didn't know that I went in thinking that he could be champion. And I know you haven't seen the footage, but I kind of feel that way. I feel like he could be a champion now.
Oh, that's the thing, man. I think a lot of times when you come away from the sport, it gives you a much different perspective. I think you look at yourself in a very different way. You can analyze your mistakes that you've made and switch things up. And I think that, I think that happened with Korean Zombie. And he also said he was really inspired by Dominic Cruz and him coming back from his injuries and things like that. So I think he's just one of those guys that are so mentally tough and absolutely fearless. I mean, to just step into the pocket like he does without any fear is just very, very, very impressive. Now, he needs to be careful against the higher level of strikers in the 145-pound division. I mean, and there are a lot of them in that division. But he's just so big. So, he was much bigger than Bermudez. So it's going to take a big shot to take out someone like Korean Zombie. I thought his timing was impeccable on the uppercut. I think that he is one of these guys that might be a champion in that division. I think he's that good. And, if I thought he was going to get it done, I thought it would be with a submission.
Right.
I don't think he's the cleanest striker in the world. But I'll tell you what, he hits hard and he's getting better, and he's going to continue to get better.
And you still picked him as the underdog, even though you had him by submission. I would imagine with Dominic Cruz fighting and how much time you spend on that desk as an analyst, that at some point in the last couple months, you've been asked this ring rust question as to whether or not you believe in it. It seems like most people do believe in it. Most fighters do believe in it. Dominic Cruz is adamant that it really doesn't exist and that it's just a mental thing. Where do you fall on it?
Well, I think it comes down to that belief. Do you believe in it? Is it real or is it not? I think there's a couple things. I think it's the way that you train, and I think it's your mindset. I think that if you're not consistent with your training, then, you are absolutely going to suffer. And training is much different than fighting. But I think it does come down to that mental aspect. If you think you're going to be a little bit rusty, or if you think you're going to be a slow starter, then guess what? You absolutely will. And it's that attachment to that thought that I think that screws up a lot of people. And I think you kind of just need to get it out of your head like Dominic Cruz did, like Korean Zombie, and just go for it, man. And, both of those guys very inspiring in how they compete.
Felice Herrig, I think, was inspiring over the weekend. Beats Alexa Grasso as about a 3-1 underdog and really has revitalized her career to an extent that I don't think a lot of people gave her a chance to do. And obviously always had a lot of physical gifts and a lot of combat sports experience, but it seems like it was mental issues and some psychological things that were holding her back. She lost her brother, I think, when she was about 7 years old, as we mentioned early on in her walk this weekend. It was around the 25th anniversary of her brother's passing, but she seems to sort of be able to channel that now. And Alexa Grasso, I think, is going to learn from this loss. The reason I bring up Felice Herrig is sort of when we talk about the mental and the psychological. It brings me to James Vick, because this dude just gives zero fucks, right? I mean, that is the way he is. He smiles the whole way to the octagon. All he wants to do is compete at home in Texas, where seemingly there is the most pressure. Obviously has a great frame for the lightweight division. I think he has an underrated training camp under Lloyd Irvin, because people seem to want to crack on it, and yet they just keep getting better. Here he was coming off the first loss of his career. Devastating knockout loss to Beneil Dariush. Only loss as a pro, obviously only loss in the UFC. And comes in here against Abel Trujillo. You picked him to win the fight. I know you didn't see it, but, I mean, dude's got, obviously, reach. He's got great stand-up skills, a ton of different submissions in his arsenal. Maybe it's my Ultimate Fighter live bias, but I'm happy for James Vick, man. I like the way he approaches it. There's nothing mentally that's going to get him off his game. He just enjoys his day job.
And he's just sneaky tough, man. This is a guy who's never going to quit. Just very, very, very impressed with him at all times. And he is one of those guys who really looks at it from a very analytical standpoint. He's a true martial artist. And he's just a little bit more consistent than his opponent, who just, he'll show up and then he won't show up. It's weird. And that's a guy with a lot of physical gifts. Now, Felice Herrick, you talked about her. It's good to see her kind of get some momentum here, because she was one of those fighters who always had the skills, always had the physical gifts, but really wasn't executing it on. And I think it was that Paige Van Zandt moment that was probably her big time blow to kind of switch her whole career around. And that's when I said, when she lost to Paige Van Zandt, I said, she's not ready. I lost my belief in Felice. But now I think she's regained it. She's fighting very well. And it was good to see it, man. I'm very impressed with her performance against Grasso.
Some interesting upset wins. Volkan Oezdemir by split decision over Oven St. Preux. Fight could have gone either way. I would agree with Dana White. It was a better fight than the crowd gave it credit for. Marcel Fortuna with a huge knockout of Anthony Hamilton. Kenny, I don't know if you saw on the broadcast, but as Brian Stam was making his way into the octagon, Mick Maynard, our matchmaker, said to him, and we were all amazed, obviously, with Marcel Fortuna's knockout of the much bigger Anthony Hamilton, who cuts down from, whatever he is to make 266. And here is Fortuna coming in at 210, right? He's a light heavyweight, but to get into the UFC, Kenny, Mick Maynard calls him and he says, I'm 230. Huh. So they give him the fight. He weighs 210. So Maynard tells that to Brian, who goes into the octagon, and he says, hey, dude, congrats on the win, man. You told the UFC you weighed 230 just to get the fight. Of course, he knocks out this behemoth heavyweight, Anthony Hamilton. So that was a cool moment.
Wow.
Curtis Blades, I know you didn't see it, but just,
got the best name ever. I do know that.
Razor frickin' Blades, dude, the takedown game, just unbelievable. At least on paper, statistically, it ended up being one of the bigger mismatches in UFC history as he beats Adam Milstead, who suffered that devastating injury. So, entertaining fight card top to bottom. Jessica Andrade over Angela Hill, and really what some people are calling the best UFC strawweight fight in the division's history. I don't know off the top of my head that I can argue otherwise. So Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Andrade, that seemingly will be the next fight for the UFC featherweight championship. In terms of who is next for the Korean Zombie, and of course we could talk about the other side for Dennis Bermudez, potentially a 2 or 3 year setback, at least in terms of title contention for him. It's going to be a long road back. But for Chan Sung Jung, Kenny, there are so many different possibilities as to how you could match this guy up. I think the first name that came to mind for most of us without looking at the rankings was Yair Rodriguez. Anybody else that you could thrust into the mix for the Korean Zombie? I think he can headline if you want. He could really do a lot of different things with Korean Zombie on the strength of this win.
He's a beast, man. I think that that Yair fight makes a lot of sense. I think it's a phenomenal fight. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there. I don't know as far as
I'm trying to pull up the rankings
right now. What's his ranking right now? I'm
trying to pull it up. So obviously the Korean Zombie's not ranked. Jeremy Stevens is number 5 in the world right now. I think he would like that fight. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Korean Zombie land in this 5, 6, 7 range. Anthony Pettis, Charles Oliveira. Yair Rodriguez is there at number 8. T-City, Brian Ortega's in the top 10. I don't know if he has a fight lined up. He's always entertaining. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, Lamas, Edgar, Holloway, and Aldo obviously are going to fight. But, Cub Swanson at number 4. That's a fight that has a lot of traction.
That's a great fight. Absolutely. I mean, that would be phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, what about, I know Ryan Hall's not in there, and I'm always kind of pushing Ryan Hall, but give him Ryan Hall. Why not? That'd be a cool fight. But Charles Oliveira in there, Anthony Pettis, that'd be a cool fight.
I like that Ryan Hall is sort of out there politicking a little bit as much as a guy cut the way he is will. But I like that he's politicking for big fights. That's the thing, right? He wants to test his skills against the guys that are best in the world. He's just like Ken Flo, right? Like he's not here he just wants to fight all the best guys in the world. Have no interest in Ken Flo, who never fought in a prelim in his life. One of the great stats of all time. 0 prelims for Kenny. Fuel TV prelims. Ken Flo's like, yeah, no, I'm not fighting on Fuel TV, guys. Sorry, guys. Who else did I want to shout out? Chaz Skelly, man, just a great guy and a great athlete. Another submission win for him. It's like, I don't know, man. So many of these guys at featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight are so good, and yet they're not ranked or they don't get the credit they deserve because those divisions are so good. I mean, Chaz Skelly is money, and I don't think he's in the rankings. Maybe he will be soon. But a great fight card, obviously, in Houston over the weekend, and now the focus shifts to UFC 208. Before we get there, want to tell you quickly about Rocket Mortgage. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans proudly supports The Anik and Florian Podcast, when it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, it's